Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex. If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. And if you enjoy listening to our show, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button on the episodes. Finally, aside from our podcast, our day job here at Riderflex is to provide recruiting, staffing, and consulting services. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get the information on the services we provide. And now, a quick word from our sponsor and friends at Marketing 360.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Bill Graebel on the Riderflex podcast. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Hello, Steve. I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me today.
It's an honor. You got an interesting story. Obviously, love the whole family story, the business story, love all of it. Anxious to get into, the whole business aspect. But before we do that, how about just Bill the person? I want to know, married, kids, grandkids, all give me some personal stuff if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I'm married for the last 33 years to the same woman, and
Nice.
have two sons. One's 30 years old, just turned 30 about a week ago, and the other is 28. And I just learned last night that I'm soon to be a grandfather. So that's a pretty exciting moment in time, if you will.
Oh, wow. Now, how did they tell you? How did you find out? A little phone call, or did they come over?
Both our sons came over, and it was a surprise for us. The two brothers had shared the news, but it was a surprise to my wife and I. And so it was all ostensibly them bringing over some Thai food, and we all watching Monday Night Football last night. And so, when dinner was over, my older son kind of gave us this little box, and it had a golf ball on it, and then there was like a little logo, like Graebel Baby May 2022, and it was like, oh wow,
cool. Very good. All right, that's very. Did your wife tear up a little bit? Is she super happy?
Oh, no doubt. Obviously, those are big moments. I'm sure for every family, and for us, it was very validating and exciting, and
cool.
It's and another part you asked about me. I turned 60 this year, and I suppose that's a natural part of your timeline that you kind of take stock on where you've been and what you went through and where you find yourself. And then, for me, it was like, oh my gosh, 20 years of like hopeful relevance, mobility, energy. And, those things weren't necessarily seemed to have an expiration date in all the other, years and birthdays you celebrate. But when you hit 60, it's like, geez, if I can get a good 20 years of maintaining, energy and activity and relevance and, your mental competencies, that'll be a good run and a good life.
Well, you've had a great life already, but yeah, if you get another 20 years in, I mean, hey, that's icing on the cake, right?
Yeah. So,
Isn't
and
it
that
interesting?
basically kind of speaks to, the mentality of, embrace each day and the goodness that it represents and the opportunities ahead of you, and nothing stays the same forever. And so to, whether to remain curious or be a lifelong learner, there's no taking your foot off the gas in the game of life, let alone running a business. There's so many converging forces of change that if you don't embrace them, even, intellectually and curiously, suddenly your relevance is going to wane. And then eventually your own children probably don't even want to pay attention to you because you can't even talk in relevant terms of what's going on in contemporary times. So,
it is interesting as you get older how I'll be 50. Well, I am 54. And you're right. The whole mobility and energy and, I never thought about it when I was younger. I mean, I could work 19-hour days. I could just, I could just go forever. And I could still outpace most 54-year-olds, but I definitely don't have the juice I had when I was 34.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even mobility, same thing, right? I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, let me. Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but it is nice to. I am like you. I do. I kind of. I give thanks. Every single day. I'm like, okay, cool. I get to live. I get to be here another day. Let's see what we can do. So it's a blessing as you get older. Just every day you get to be alive. So I get it.
Yeah, and in so many ways, Steve. We're fortunate. I think a lot of people often don't take stock of the fact how fortunate we are to be, U.S. citizens. And,
right.
Frankly, the opportunity and privileges a U.S. passport provide you in comparison to, most residents of other nations. And then even going further, the respect for the civility and the sacrifices that have made this such a great country.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of, again, forces that are maybe unsettling with respect to the future of America, and it gets hyper politicized and polarized and all of that. But man, it's the good people of America that make America. It's not the politicians. Right. And, and each and every one of us, I think, have a duty to do our best to old notion of leave it better than you found it, right? And we've all been the beneficiaries of others' hard work that came before us. And
yes,
our, duty, if you will, is to, keep chipping away at making this a better society, a safer society, a cleaner society in the sense of, we got some environmental issues to deal with that we have a duty, in my opinion, to act on and be catalysts for. So anyway, there's a lot to be excited about on any given day.
Anytime I meet somebody, especially a younger person that is complaining to me about, living about America or whatever, my first question is, have you ever been to a third world country?
Yeah.
Have you ever traveled outside of Colorado? Yeah, we got a pretty good here, just so you know.
Yeah, no question.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I'm all about leaving it a better place than we found it, because we're not here forever, and I want to do everything I can to make it a better place for people too. And I think most people feel that way, right? I mean, you look at social media, you would think that everybody's an asshole and everybody's pissed off all the time and this and that, but really, it's in real life. Like, all you got to do is just go to the grocery store, talk to regular people, go to the park, take a hike, meet somebody on the trail. Actually, most people are inherently good people and nice to each other and pleasant. Just real life is much different than what you're seeing on your phone.
That's very true. And balancing that sets of stimuli between real person engagement and observations versus, kind of the anonymous chatter that exists out on social platforms. There's a bit of mythology out there. There's a bit of fiction out there. And I think people are becoming more and more scrutinous of the credibility and authenticity of the messaging they're receiving from all channels, right? I mean, we're multi-channel recipients and respondents these days, but and it's been interesting, kind of getting back together again in small groups, since the pandemic began, and kind of re-socializing and re-social skilling ourselves in a way. That human connection certainly has been a missing link for many folks over the last 18 months or more.
Yes.
And it's nice to kind of just get that physical proximity with folks again.
It's wonderful.
And the validation and affirmation of goodness and fondness and alignment and things like that.
Yes. I mean, we are, we're social creatures, right? I mean, we want to be around each other. You know, we went to dinner with a client last week. We went to dinner. In fact, tonight we're going to dinner in Denver with a client. And, you know, it's just even last week, I was telling my co-founder, Scott, I said, isn't it just so wonderful to just be out with people and be at dinner? Like, it's so great. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, we just want to be around each other. We actually weren't meant to live in caves.
No.
But anyway, so I want to ask you, so what was it like growing up in a family business where at a very early age, whatever you were, I don't know, 11, 12, whenever you started unloading trucks, what was it like growing up, you know, with your dad owning a business and working for him as a kid? Talk to me about it a little bit.
Well, at the time, it's the only thing you know. And what we
Right.
knew and observed was that we were a small, humble Midwest family business that was built around service and doing so in the, sanctuary of people's homes, right? So it's an interesting, invasive service.
I hadn't
You
thought of
actually
it.
come into
Right.
somebody's homes and you're handling all of their possessions and you're seeing how people live. And, you know, there are neat freaks in this world and there are slobs and there are, mean-spirited people. And there
pleasant
are
ones.
just lovely people. And, you know, every day that you would go to a residence, when you ring the doorbell, it's like a blind date each day. You know, you have some background on the people, but in terms of how you're greeted and how, it's a two-way street, how you make them feel and how they make you feel. And then, regardless, everybody's stuff is important and valuable to them. So regardless of what your own individual reaction might be about them and the condition of their house and, the quality or lack thereof of the things that they're moving, the performance standard is really the same, So what was it like? Didn't know any different, was a worker, wanted to be a good teammate. At an age appropriate level, I was advancing into different, skill sets. Originally started out in garages and basements and putting things in boxes that couldn't be broken, and then carrying them out from the basement or the garage to the truck. But, by the time I was 16, I already then was a driver and a crew chief. And then as I completed college, I had worked all the summers through college as a driver, driving throughout the Midwest. And then, if you will, I got an office job after I graduated college. And, basically initially around recruiting, developing, and training crew members to do, that job I was familiar with, which is packing and loading and storing items in warehouses. So, it was just, I don't know, just a natural progression that seemed absolutely normal. And as time went on, the reach of our organization opening in new cities and the scale of it becoming larger, along the way, I just had a lot of great mentors who were humble, hungry, and smart that wanted to better their careers. And our company was providing a platform for that. So, I saw many drivers, come up through the ranks as they got older to come in and become dispatchers, operations managers, or safety managers, or, things of that nature. And then some of the enterprising ones would cross over and get into business development or customer service. And, after maybe 6 to 8 years in the office, having come off the trucks, could get promoted into being general managers of a given, city. So it wasn't any brilliant revelation or anything like that. It was, like I said earlier, staying curious and staying focused on customer needs and recognizing that there is only one standard of service, and that's excellence, and to do your best regardless of the quality or the size or the nature of somebody's move, or whether they were a single person, a married person, an old person, a young person. You went in and you just had a duty of care and a craftsmanship that it was expected to be consistently applied.
Did
And
you feel people treating you different? Could you tell that the other employees were sometimes nervous around you, or treated you differently, or treated you, quote, with kid gloves because your dad was captain? Could you feel that at all when you were younger?
no, but I recognize that could be a situation, but I could take control of that. And so how I took control of that, I just out hustled, outworked, demonstrated curiosity and study and asking, how does this work? And, oh, I get it now. Or, back in those days too, I was an athlete, through high school, played 3 sports, and then later on more focused on ski racing as I went to college. And so what I loved about it is I was getting paid to do physical work. And, it was like an added bonus to not just have to go to the gym or, run 3 miles or whatever a day. I could still do that. But, 8 hours a day lifting and walking and carrying and so forth. I just felt, gosh, I have a little bit of an advantage here, in that I'm getting paid to do something I love. And in the process of doing that, I can demonstrate what my work ethic is. I can demonstrate my, level of engagement with the business. So I guess to answer your question, Steve, I recognized it early on, but I kind of took control of then saying, I don't ever want to be, treated with kid gloves just because I'm a family member or otherwise. I can skate on making mistakes, or I can, show up late, or, there's not going to be a double standard here, I guess, was what I said to myself back in those days, and just said, I'll earn the respect of people by my actions and not my birth certificate.
And was your dad a tough guy? Was he pretty demanding, strict, or was he more of a softie? Like, what was his style?
A driven entrepreneur, and a lovely family man and father and husband that I think was a great role model in terms of demonstrating, if you will, work-life balance or work-life integration. So fierce competitor, an industry pioneer and innovator in a lot of different ways. And that was all compartmentalized in the sense that, he had a job to do. He took his job very seriously. He saw the big picture. He realized there were gaps that the industry was not necessarily, addressing with real effectiveness. And, he ran toward those gaps to try to figure out solutions, right? And so that was a great role model with respect to curiosity and purpose and applied energy and no wasted effort and, things of that nature. But in the home context, he wanted nothing but to have fun with his sons and to be a good husband and, teaching us things with respect to, whatever, the outdoors or sports and all of that. So,
well, the reason I ask is because a lot of guys, I'm guessing your dad was born in the late 20s or early 30s or something like that.
Correct.
Most of those guys born in that era right there, they were pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know if stern is the right word, but they were pretty tough, demanding, usually, guys, back then. Right. Maybe pass out a hug every once in a while, but not a ton of them.
Yeah. Well, certainly a lot of that I think came from, how many young men then became older men, but had service experience in the military, right? And the command and control structures and the hierarchies and all of that. And certainly, he understood the need for discipline and clarity. By discipline, I don't mean like consequences. I mean by like having structure and clarity and process defined. But, His mentality was to never to control anybody, but to create an environment where the want to and everybody came out.
Ooh,
Right. And that's a whole
all right.
different leadership style
Yes.
than command and control.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And so again, by osmosis, before you ever know that's a thing, that's all I'm exposed to. So
Mhm.
you might say, you know, my whole leadership style, whether it's, you know, it has nothing to do with what number are you on the org chart. It has everything to do that if you have a responsibility for either collaboration with other peers or otherwise supervising and being accountable for the efforts of others, you know, just I guess what I was exposed to is the notion is it's up to the leader to create the environment, and it's up to the leader through their actions and behaviors to be truly in the eyes of others a leader worth following. You know, so those kind of mantras and messages, it was just like oxygen. It was around me constantly. There wasn't a big fanfare about it. It was easy to observe.
Great. Great. You and your brother both, you had one brother?
Yes.
And you and your brother both worked for the company coming up, and your brother was older than you, and he was president for a little while. I think he may have passed away. I think I read that in the press. So at one point your brother was your quote boss.
Yes.
How'd that go? How'd that work?
You know, generally fine. You know, there was about a 5.5-year gap between us. In some ways, as a brother, forget a boss, as a brother, he was awesome. You know, and I came through the school of hard knocks. You know, he was very welcoming for me to play basketball or football in the backyard with his friends. And I got my nose bloodied plenty of times. And, you know, I got knocked down under the basketball hoop plenty of times. But, you know, I'm really thankful for him including me and giving me that sense of, I guess you would just say, you know, toughness of if you get knocked down, get back up if you're going to actually be wanting to play the games, because, you know, you're going to get knocked down just because you're younger or smaller, doesn't matter.
Yep.
And so then flipping it over to when we were both working together and for a time him supervising me, you know, it's nothing fancy, Steve. The whole notion is about mutuality. He wanted nothing more than for me to be effective in what I was assigned to do. He was there for me if I didn't understand, or, you know, nobody's perfect. And so there would be times where he'd be like, hey, son, come here. You know, next time you get this situation, you know, try this or don't do that. So, you know, and we never really had what I would call a power struggle, because I never envisioned myself as being, you know, whether intellectually or experientially superior to him.
Did you guys any fun Thanksgiving dinner stories where you and your brother and your dad are like had a food fight or anything? You got anything cool to share with us?
I can't say really on the conflict side of things. I can tell you all sorts of war stories about solving service challenges when people are in the midst of their relocation over, you know, Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving weekend or Christmas or Christmas Eve or that window between Christmas and New Year's. You know, there would be times, whether it's weather related snowstorms or crew members just saying, screw it. You know, I have a family too, and I'm going to spend time with my family. And I know I gave my obligation to, you know, deliver this shipment on Christmas Eve, but no, it's going to happen the day after Christmas.
And yeah, the truck is at the Love's parking lot.
Yeah, and so it may seem strange, but you know, we didn't have necessarily a lot of conflict that way, but you know, it was sometimes dreadful when the phone would ring at like 8 p.m. on a holiday, and then you realize, wow, this is a big escalation of something going not so well, and then
Now, how about you have a son in the business?
I have two sons in the business.
You have two sons in the business. Yeah, two sons in the business, and both of them are working. What's the age gap?
They're only about 15 months apart. So my older son just turned 30 last week. My younger
Yeah.
son turns 29 in February.
Yeah.
Our older son works in our digital marketing and business development group, which is
Okay.
obviously a new frontier for just about every business. And it's something that, he's not doing a job that somebody else has previously done in our organization. So there's a lot of white canvas for him to paint out there. And,
Okay.
and it's a vast discipline that, any organization needs to grow into and figure out how to master. And then once you think you got it, the algorithm shift or the user experience bar elevates, or, the speed of responsiveness is, intensified.
Yeah.
Our younger son works in our supplier development group, which basically he's a category manager for all of the North American continent household good providers that perform import or export moving services. So the literal moving companies, and many of them used to be our competitors, and now they're our partners, that we represent a large customer to them as we aggregate all the other corporate clients that we have. And then we have the responsibility for orchestrating the multiple services that go into when a family is relocated. So beyond the move, it could be buying and selling a home, arranging a mortgage, pet transportation, if it's an overseas move, visas and work permits and language training or cross-cultural training or area orientation at destination. So depending on the individual and the nature of their assignment and the to's and the froms, on any given relocation, there might be 25 different services that we kind of orchestrate into a, kind of a symphony of experience that some come before us, some are occurring simultaneously. But long story short, our younger son manages the household goods service stream for the international import or export services related to North America.
The fact that you have both of your sons working for you in the business is a success story in and of itself, not just because they're your sons and they're working for you, but not their third generation, right? I mean, I don't know what the stats are. I don't know the exact stats, but if your sons end up taking over the business, third generation, that is a tiny percentage of companies that actually successfully make it that many jumps down, right? I mean, so often it just it crashes from first generation to second generation, and then to make it to the third generation, that is a small, tiny group of companies. So congratulations on keeping the family unit together, not only working in the business, but I mean, you just told me both sons were over to celebrate the fact that you were going to be a grandparent, which means your relationship with them is obviously still wonderful. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because I know so many family-owned business situations that are just messier than hell, and just, bad relationships and just all kinds of just bad stuff. And so for you to share that means that you've balanced the personal relationship with the business, which is super hard to do. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. There's a lot of mortality, certainly. It accelerates second to third generation in businesses, and any number of things. It can be contentment, it can be distrust, it can be you lose your competitive advantages because you've been content where you've been operating previously. I mean, so there are any number of forces. I also have a niece that works in the business. So my brother's oldest child, she also works in our client implementation group. So
wow. Okay.
And I give credit to those kids. They kind of understood the same, if you will, reality that I did as a kid. Everybody's looking at you and seeing, are they the real deal? Are they working a full day? Are they really passionate about the business? Are they pulling their weight? And, they've all come to grips with that, and they're star performers in every team that they're a part of, unsolicited. The managers and other team members, just cycle back to me and they're like, oh my gosh, you've really raised good kids here. And I give my mom and dad the credit. They set the example. They taught us the principles. That's cascaded down, obviously. And I'm sure that, now my two boys and my niece are rendering that in today's, kind of contemporary way, and connecting with coworkers in probably a similar fashion that I did back in the day. And, it's just pretty basic stuff, Steve. It's being transparent. Part of it is being honest with yourself so you can be honest with others, right? There's no way you can be honest with others if you first aren't honest with yourself. And so I think certainly every family can have better communications between generations, but I think we've all had a mindset of we're working for each other. We're working for those who follow us. So, I think that's where family businesses can get a little bit sideways, is that, if you will, there's a certain entitlement to take more value or equity out of the business prior to having a contribution value, right?
Bingo.
And so maybe the difference that uniquely we've been able to just organically or intuitively craft is that, in a sense, we're fortunate from where we find ourselves, but we realize we have a duty to not stand pat, to not, consume the resources of the business so we can't reinvest in the future, and that we're intrigued and curious about, what's the customer tomorrow going to look like, and what are we doing today to ready ourselves to be ever more valuable and relevant and, if you will, market dominant and serving that customer of tomorrow. And that's just an orientation. And if you can get on that orientation, there are a lot of positive energy drivers then that, I suppose you would say, govern your actions and behaviors, and then people take notice, and it's kind of monkey see, monkey do after a while. If they see ownership behaving this way, then that just kind of cascades down through the org.
So many good things you said right there for the listeners to learn from that. I want to highlight 3 points there out of that speech. Taking equity, quote, equity of some kind out of the business before the contribution. That is I've never heard it actually put exactly that way. And man, that is such a great point, because that is a major problem. And when second or third generation comes in and they want to take, so to speak, before they give, it creates problems. I think that is a wonderful point. The other thing you mentioned is eyes on family members, employee eyes on family members. Like it or not, bottom line is, if you're a family member, everybody's watching you. Everybody's watching you. They're watching what time you get there. They're watching what time you leave. They're watching your contribution. They're watching your every movement. And the fact that you've coached the family members to understand that and how important it is really critical.
Well, it can either be an oppressive force, or it can be an invigorating force.
Right.
And, and frankly, I think it's an invigorating force if you bring, this is maybe a weird juxtaposition, but a humble self-confidence to the equation, right?
Yes.
You can be
humbly
cocky
confident
and self-confident, and that turns people off.
Right.
But if you have like a humble self-confidence, I think that's, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, an energy magnet for people.
Agreed. I had a Navy SEAL tell me one time, his terminology was humbly confident. And I thought that was a great one. The third piece I just wanted to mention there of what you were talking about was the whole, the overly content factor. I think that's another major reason for failure in second or third generation, is because once a little bit of money is made, once there's a little bit of cushion there, second and third generation, they just become content, right? They're like, oh, well, got a little money in the bank. We got a couple of homes, this, that, whatever. And they don't have the same tenacity to want to keep it going and work hard. And I think that's another reason that family businesses fail in the second or third generation. So the fact that you touched on all three of those was wonderful. Awesome.
Experientially, Steve, part of that outlook is just a function of, we're a 71-year-old business today.
Yeah.
But we've kind of reinvented ourselves 5 times over that 71 years. And I personally have been involved with 4 of those iterations or iterative notions. And, what's really interesting, and this is totally random and coincidental, but each iteration of the company has, each successor has had a half-life of its predecessor. So to give you what out of the 71 years, the first 33 years of our company were really pretty much in the same vein, but just growing scope in terms of the number of markets that we entered into.
Okay.
So then we made a change and disrupted ourselves. And rather than being an agent for Allied Van Lines, we launched our own van line to compete against Allied Van Lines. So
that was a major, that was a major move right there. That was a big move.
Immediately, within a matter of 90 days, probably 40 to 50% of our business evaporated. And so right when you're ramping up to expand locations and buy more equipment, 40% of your revenue stream contracts. And so that created a certain amount of.
What year was that? What do you remember?
That would have been in 83. So from 1950 to 1983, we were operating inside the Allied Van Lines network as a franchisee and just expanding franchise locations. And a combination of things, bylaws that said you can only have this many franchises under the Allied Van Line umbrella.
Oh, okay.
And an intersection of President Reagan deregulating all forms of transportation. And so what that really meant is if we wanted to take the risk, we could go out and get an operating permit to then be a 48 state carrier.
Did you get to be in the meeting when your dad called Allied and said, "Hey, by the way, we're doing this on our own. See ya." Did you get to be on that meeting?
I wasn't there for the phone call, but I was certainly. He would bring our managers into the house and have management meetings, and of course, I'd be sitting in the other room and kind of leaning in.
I love it. Love it.
I think by design, I think he allowed us to just, if we wanted to be in earshot, we could. So anyway, my point is that, we had a 33-year focus, we had a 16-year focus, we had an 8-year focus. And then, really in the last 8 years, we've had 2 incremental focuses to where we find ourselves today. And, where we find ourselves today is a global organization, about 300 people working outside the U.S., 600 people in the U.S. We're almost kind of becoming a technology company that specializes in relocation and customer service. So kind of that intersection of high tech and high touch.
Are you selling some software, some patented or some software that you've developed of some kind for transportation or relo?
We aren't selling it per se as a standalone product, but to do what we do to manage, large Fortune 500 programs, and then integrate and aggregate all these different services downstream that a transferee might need. So there's a lot of tech to orchestrate, all the supplier segments in 165 countries around the world, and to automate as much of that as possible, and encrypt what you need, and to keep secure, and comply with the GDPR laws and data, residency laws.
Yes.
Gosh, that is all just like new greenfield areas of responsibility and accountability.
Right.
But it's largely tech enabled. And then if you pivot over to the client side, the person that would be our boss at XYZ or ABC Corporation, there's all sorts of data information that we need to surface and run through analytics and determine, the design of their programs for whatever outcome they want. Do they want more cost efficacy, meaning an ability through the data to see how they could spend more or less on one service or another in order to affect the ultimate outcome they desire, and so different companies and different industries have different outcomes they desire in terms of the metrics that then about the program get elevated inside those organizations and played back to business unit leaders, to chief financial officers. And all of them are to say, well, what's the return on investment when we choose to relocate somebody? How do we know that, the client has made a smart decision choosing Steve to relocate to Beijing with this kind of package? And how does that impact his, own personal performance metrics? And or how does it penetrate the teams that Steve is overseeing, and does their performance improve, right? Some companies are really precise about that. Others are just saying, hey, demonstrate to me you can save me 2% over the prior, entity we had managing this program. And other employers are all about, look, at the margin, we know this costs us something, but whatever you do, do not make a purchase decision, if you will, on our behalf that could compromise the employee's experience. That employee's experience is so important to us. We want the thing to run as smooth as butter and have them feel like, they got upgraded and are on the red carpet in every interaction that they're having during the course of their relocation. So, and then one final piece on the tech, so every transferee that we relocate, this is their project management tool, right? And so everything about their relocation and the updates and scheduling and so forth to be rendered on an app and make it easy and convenient, and have the chat bots available for them or otherwise operators standing by. So that's where I say, there's a lot of tech that goes into the business that creates the experiences or the analytics or the, frankly, the ability to know what good is, and the client defines what good is, but to then be able to render, you expected this, and these are the key data points or the key performance indicators that we've performed against.
Let me ask you about COVID before we get to run out of time. What did it do? I mean, I'm assuming 2020 was not an exceptional year for you. I'm assuming it was down a little bit versus 2019. Maybe not. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but give me the kind of the short overview of what did it do for you? What did you guys do to fight through it? If you want to chat about that for a minute.
Sure. I'll start with, I was in London near the end of February of 2020, and I was about to go from London down to India, where we were opening an office in India on March 10th of 2020. And I'm in London and I'm riding the tubes and I'm hearing, on the BBC, how Italy and Spain are blowing up with this cases of, at the time, the Wuhan virus. And so I just decided, oh my gosh, first of all, I'm probably going to get this darn Wuhan virus just riding the tubes in London. Secondly, it's inappropriate for me to go down to India because quite possibly I could get stuck down there. So I came home.
Okay.
I'm home for about 10 days, of course, meeting with our team. We had a normal global town hall scheduled for March 12th. And on the evening of March 11th is when they canceled the Final Four basketball tournament and the NBA and the NHL and all of that. And, that was almost like a 9/11 moment, I think, for anybody
a little bit,
watching or paying attention. It's like, oh my gosh, our world is just like changed instantly. We don't know how or why or what is next, but all of a sudden, major disruptive force, right?
Mm-hmm.
So came in the office that next day, March 12th, and scheduled to do the town hall. And I got together with our chief talent officer, chief financial officer, and chief operating officer. And we had this lovely deck that we had prepared and talking about the performance of, we finished 2019 and we're off to a record start in 2020. And, charts and graphs and all that happy stuff and new announcements about, the India office and blah, blah, blah. And we just looked at each other that morning, kind of stunned, certainly scared. And I just said, guys, this deck will never see the light of day. Let's just pull up some chairs. Let's, basically be authentic and say, look, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's what we're going to do to find out about what we don't know. And we're human and we're scared too, but we're all in this together. And there's no benefit for us to conceal any information from any of you.
Yep.
We'll find a way. We'll find a way to get through this as unscathed as possible. So then the real hard work began because, it's all about people and you don't want to, just have a bloody day or a string of bloody days, right? So we began by kind of scenario planning, modeling out different scenarios. We knew business from North America to South America or Asia or vice versa or Europe. We knew that was going to get hammered.
Okay.
For how long? Who knew, right? And so even in the US, we knew that business would get hammered because most of them, the real estate agents couldn't show housing and, banks were just figuring out how to go off premises. And so, what would the speed of mortgage applications get approved? And so there were just so many things we didn't know, right? And
right.
so, you model out, okay, what if we had a 70% reduction of revenue for 6 months? What if we had a 50% reduction for 6 months? And we really only took it in that first 6 months increment and said, what can we do to get us to October 1st?
Your CFO, he or she, they loved running those reports.
Well, some of them are downright scary, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. And so then, it's kind of like throwing a dart at the board. And we said, basically, we planned about a 70% drop for 90 days, coming back to a 50% drop after 90 days. And then in the fourth quarter of 2020 being like a 25-30% drop. So we saw a bottom and a slow comeback.
That was probably a pretty good guess. I'm going to guess that was a pretty good guess.
It actually worked out pretty well. We wound up exceeding our original 2020 profit plan. Okay. But we got there in a way different way. It'd be like playing golf and, like putting one in the woods and then chipping back to the fairway and hitting over the green into a sand trap, but then holing out the shot from the sand trap and you made par.
Good analogy. Love that one.
Some of the things that saved us were, there was about $3 million of travel expense that we didn't consume in the final 9 months of 2020 that was built into our budget. Mm-hmm. So the reason we beat our plan, we organized ourselves to execute the business we had coming in as efficiently as possible. Everybody took pay cuts. We had about a 10% reduction in force early on. But the team was very willing to preserve as many jobs as possible by taking pay cuts. Okay. And so by the time we concluded 2020, we were amazed and relieved that,
wow, great job. Great job.
We actually outperformed our original plan. And another part that helped us was we actually had our best year of new business development in our history. And that's nothing we could have totally anticipated at the start, but it was a function of just the want to in our business development leadership team and the individuals out there trying to attract clients. And the want to was this: the events of COVID and people being stranded in certain locations and the impairment of certain services to be able to be performed, like the real estate listing agent or maybe somebody getting an area tour in a given country or a given city, some of that stuff was viewed non-essential. In most instances, moving was viewed an essential service. So the moving side of the equation could go.
I see.
But not necessarily, getting an area orientation or doing a language training or doing a cross-cultural training was viewed essential. So long story short, our business development people said, you know what? If there are flaws in our competitors' performance, they're going to be magnified. So we have to figure out this tool called Zoom and find ways to get customers' attention. And so rather than trying to book like half-hour or 1-hour meetings that you might want to do on an in-person basis, they would just try to set up a 10-minute or a 15-minute check-in and kind of like a quick cup of coffee. How you doing? What's going on with your family? Any challenges you're having at work that we can assist you with. And other than that, all right, we'll see you in another month or so. We wound up having over 800 virtual sales meetings from April 1st to December of 2020. And normally we would have had about 400 in-persons.
How about that? Now that's got to change some of your behaviors moving forward, right? Wouldn't you? I mean, I'm assuming you're looking at what used to be your travel budget, and now you're like, well, wait a minute, hold on. If we can close that many sales using Zoom, we don't necessarily have to have the same airline expense this next year, right? I'm guessing.
That's presumed, but then what's the ratio of them? And that's all going to be discoverable. So
okay.
As it gets to business planning, part of the messaging is we're going to plan conservative to keep the controls somewhat in place.
Okay.
But we do recognize that it is beneficial for people to get back in-person contact. So we don't really want to tie people's hands and say there's no travel, but we want to have the budgets lean enough so they have to think.
Gotcha. Perfect.
And in the past, maybe they wouldn't think. It was assumed, hey, I can hop on any flight. I've got a justifiable series of appointments, and I can stay at the Hyatt as opposed to staying at Holiday Inn Express, or whatever the case might be. And
yes, yeah,
I think some of those behaviors are going to be just had a reality check, which is okay.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah, I think a nice balanced approach there is good. I remember our own American Express bill after the first few months of COVID. I got the American Express bill and I'm like, wow, I haven't seen a bill this small in a long time.
Exactly.
Congratulations on, what a great success story for you and your leadership team to fight through that, make the adjustments you made, come out of it beating your profit goal for 2020. That is a major win for you and your team. The adjustments you made, the pivots you made, I think the forecasting that you did early on, kudos to whoever was in that meeting saying, hey, I think 70% down the first few months. And great job. Congrats on that. Really, really nice job from your leadership team.
That was a team effort. There was no fist pounders. It was a lot of, questions. Here's how I feel, or I'm saying that in a pluralistic, people would get together and say, well, because of this indicator or this indicator in my discipline, this is how I would feel about that, or, such and such. We tried to get as much voice of the customer woven into it, but of course they didn't know. They didn't have any sense of reality, based on data or directive in their own organizations. They were all in shock and awe as well.
I think we're rounding a corner now. At least it feels like we are. I like to think I'm not an expert on, every time I make a prediction on something, with this stuff, I'm usually wrong. So, but I feel like we're rounding a corner. I don't know. Maybe I just want to feel that way. I don't know.
Well, I think, certainly, as a society, I think we're all feeling that, right? And the ability to go out, and whether you want to go to a concert or a football game or a restaurant, the fear of not knowing how you can contract this virus, or its severity. I think some of the things we're learning is those who are unvaccinated are really the ones that are occupying the hospitals at this point in the game. And I think economies are realizing, there's a certain cost any disease in our society has on our economy, but we've seen what a massive adverse impact on economies the pandemic had, but whether it's case count or whatever, to a degree, I think politicians as well as citizens are willing to accept some of those trade-offs a little more than they did initially.
I think football stadiums being full is a sign of that. But I use that 'cause when I see 80,000 people in football stands, I'm like, okay, that's a sign.
Yeah. I flew back from Los Angeles, and I've started to do a little bit of domestic U.S. travel here recently. And to me, the telltale sign of when it's over is when you don't need to wear a mask on the airplane or in the airport or in some of the states, if you go to an inside, store or a shop or something like that. I don't know when that's going to be. I think the masks on airplanes and in airports will probably be with us through much of 2022, but hopefully not.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to deal with that. Fortunately, I don't have to fly a bunch these days, but I know you guys have to a bunch. Bill, final question. I know we're out of time, and you've been so wonderful, and thank you for sharing your story. Really a tremendous story from a family and business perspective. I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but I know we're out of time. At this stage in your life, at the age of 60, you're about to be grandparent for the first time. By the way, have you decided if you're going to call yourself Papa, Grandpa? What have you decided? No, you still okay.
That came up last night. That'll organically come out. We'll see when it happens.
Okay. At this stage, though, how would you define Bill's core purpose in life right now, moving forward, if you had to put that into a sentence?
Well, there's probably two things. One, I have a duty to make sure that our bench strength and leadership is being established, that it goes on without me, right? In that and we've done a good job for a long time with this, but to be a values-centric and customer-centric organization that understands its business, that can be profitable so it can reinvest in its future, right? So, but more specific to your question, so it's to make sure we got the right talent in the organization, we've got the right developmental, scalable, it's a global business now, right? So it's not just dealing with people in the US.
Right.
But to make sure we're an attractive employer in our various Asian locations, an attractive employer in the various European as well as US, and the whole employer value proposition is changing dramatically all over the world in terms of what do employees want to get out of their relationship with their employer. We know that there's a bit of less like loyalty or tenure expected in the new generations of workers with an employer.
Yes, there is.
Our job is to make our employment brand and environment one that is counter to those trends, that we are a talent magnet. We are a place that, great people choose to work and identify with what their being or purpose or why is, and how it's complementary to apply that inside our organization. So
that's good. That's good stuff.
If you will, that's what I'm trying to accomplish. And it's not measured by dollars or employees or, it's preparing that culture for a next 30 years. And some of those workers are already in our organization. And so at some point, maybe they'll look back when I'm dead and gone and go, yeah, man, I studied with that guy, or I remember him. And, that those are the things that people latch onto. So in summary, Steve, I would say the what's of our organization have and understandably will change over time. But who we are, what we value, and why we choose to do what we do all kind of come from the same root. So, and as long as that's understood and embraced and valid, then hopefully I'm leaving the business in good hands for the next generation to come through. And they may or may not want to be, the absolute leaders. They see what a challenge it is to be a CEO or a president. And they're smart enough to know that, if that's not really their calling, or if they're not really good at it, they're probably the beginning of the end. And they have enough humility that way to say, there's better people to lead and run this company in its entirety on a global basis, serving, 200,000 families a year. I'd be stupid if I tried to pretend I could run that in 10 years, right? They're smart enough to know that.
That's
and
good.
So that'll find its level water too.
Bill, great stuff. Inspirational story. Thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. And hopefully there's some positive takeaways that some of your audience can do to help make their organization better. And as a byproduct of that, make the world better.